Greetings, my language-loving learners. I apologize. I did an entire language level up episode 3 a little bit ago, only to find out that all these fancy new graphics that I've enabled have the sound was playing on all the videos. So it's quite an interesting video, me talking for 25 minutes while you just hear random chaotic screaming. So I've renamed it to Not Language Level Up. This One Sucks. Episode Hellscape, and I'm just going to leave it up because maybe some weirdos will want to hear me screaming on a loop while I try to talk. But we have a lot of great words for you today. This is an exciting day. We're going to be very positive. My therapist stressed that the way that I kind of got emotional while healthy to feel in the last episode was maybe not healthy to share, and it put an undue burden on you for feeling responsible for my emotional state. I'm not here to put undue burdens on you. I'm here to enrich your life with the beauty of communication, clear communication, accurate communication, and artful communication. We want to be playful with these words. We don't want this isn't like you must study. This isn't a factory. This isn't a assembly line. This is not just a place of learning. It's a place of love, and that's why you are my language-loving learners. So. Fun language-loving learners. The loving does some work in that. It isn't just there because it's a nice thing to say. You have to love this stuff, and I'm here to show you the path forward into that. Now, I'm not going to get into any crazy details, but I did look up where my song, the theme song was, and then forget to play it. And there's a funny story because the first time I did this live stream, it was only because I had mentioned so many times that I had called the file bip 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 that I was able to find it. My file naming structure is completely insane. It ended up being in a folder that was called Boo with like 9 O's. So I didn't know that. Why I didn't name it language level up theme song, which would have been easier to find. But thankfully I remembered you guys asking me what it was called in real life, and that's why I told you, not just because I told you. Anyway, after that totally inappropriate beginning, we're going to do the theme song for a bit. We're going to do the theme song for a bit. Yeah. And I'm going to do finger spiders. You have to look over there. Over there. Do we feel thematic? I hope that felt thematic. It was thematic for me. Maybe it's thematic for you. And speaking of themes, did anyone watch Meme Knocked? My son and I have been assembling a weekly on Sunday nights meme video, and it's so good because his ideas are so much better than mine, but you can't tell which are his, so I bask in that reflected glow. So Sunday nights are fun day Meme Knocked, which is another dose of language you're getting here. So I've got the words ready. No further ado, let's jump right into it. The first one is Daster Duality. We all know someone what this applies to them. Daster Duality is when somebody seems very nice. They present themselves as very kind, very considerate. And then when you get to know them, when they've weaseled their way into your circle, you start to see this other side emerge, an entitled side, a side of them that uses people instrumentally, and they try to hide this fact by their duality. So it's interesting because the word itself has duality in it, yet there is a duality to the word because it also has dastard in it. But it's not a compound word like doghouse because it's fancier than that. A long word made of two words that sounds not like the two words separately because you pronounce it differently is a fancy compound word that we don't even call a compound word. Don't even think of it that way. I'm ashamed I said it. It's a fancy amalgamation of beautiful lexical terminology, and that's compound words are second grade stuff. Daster Duality is like college level. Okay, the next one is a fascinating, more scientific term. This is something you're not likely to use in daily life. You might find some inspiration metaphorically, though. A lot of poetic metaphors throughout history have been based on the science of their time, and you have to realize when you learn about science that you're stepping your toe in. None of us are going to do regression analysis just because we want to know about sea creatures or whatever, but it is nice to sort of get the gist of some of these areas of human expertise, because we've learned so much about our world and so much about it is fascinating. It can be inspiration not only scientifically but artistically. So that's why I'm teaching you encephalopod, which is a fascinating creature that was only recently discovered and documented. Its full life cycle wasn't fully understood until 2017. An encephalopod, as their name sounds, is a subaquatic creature, which means it lives below the water's surface. And it literally does, in every sense, throughout its life cycle, live in every part of the ocean, from the deepest depths to the highest heights. What an encephalopod is a small creature with a tentacle-like appendage. It's fascinating in that it eats only once during its life cycle, and that is at the very beginning. So what the adult encephalopod does is capture its prey not in the sense that it's prey for the encephalopod capturing it, but prey for its young. Catches its prey and inserts its foot-like appendage, which then incepts the creature with its young. You might be familiar with the word inception from the movie, what was it called? And it was a Christopher Nolan movie, and it had Batman in it. Anyway, it incepts its young into the prey animal, and this is where it gets truly fascinating. We've all heard of creatures that do sick things. There's wasps and so forth. What an encephalopod does is actually the first part of its life cycle. It's a symbiotic relationship. It functions as sort of a second kidney. It sort of boosts the filtration abilities of its prey, and that so that it builds up this, I can't remember, it's an amino acid or a fatty acid. It helps the creature that it's preying on build up this nutrient that the second phase of the life cycle of this encephalopod preys on, because then it switches. It becomes a parasitic creature, and then it liquefies the prey, which sea snakes, underwater spiders, which can grow to shocking size, and I would never want to encounter, and porpoises. And it liquefies them, and then the encephalopod young have then reached full maturity, and they burst out like an alien from this mushy goo. That's all that's left after there's a chemical in the encephalopod that turns the amino acid that builds up because of their kidney filtration into goo, and so it goops them up good. It's like an acidic goo, and everything else goos up. I don't want to touch that stuff. So the adult encephalopod starts rising, and the fascinating thing is they rise through the ocean for months so that they don't get the bends, or whatever the scientific term for the bends is. Even I don't have all the answers. And then as they rise, so the pressure doesn't get them, they grow and grow and grow. When they get to the top, they pop. And this is the other fascinating part, and this is the part that they didn't know about till 2017. They actually sporulate in a sort of algae lily pad grows on the surface that is genetically identical to the animal-like encephalopod, but it has completely different phenotypic expression. So it seemed like a completely different creature. It wasn't until genetic sequencing on this kind of scuzzy, it's halfway between just goo and a lily pad. It's really remarkable. And it has these striations, quite beautiful. That might be some artistic inspiration for you. Anyway, I'm getting so in depth into this creature because it's remarkable, and it was only recently discovered. So it has a plant fungi / animal like phases of its life cycle, but there's different creatures from the same being. And back to the duality we talked about earlier, that's a more positive form of it. Next word is quick. It's happy. It's kind of funny. We all know somebody who has done this, because we've all done this ourselves. And it is portendorary. Now, this is somebody who gets afforded the honorary status of having claimed to have guessed something in advance just because they're excited or happy that it happened. They're like, I knew that was going to happen, and everyone acts like they did, including that person, even though we all know they're just happy that it did happen. This doesn't work. Like, if you see a kid riding a bike without a helmet and they fall off and bonk their head and you go, I knew that was going to happen, that's not portendorary, because even though honorary in the word is used to mean it is a status conferred by politeness of their portentousness, it also has a positive connotation, so it doesn't really fit. And there is a different word for that, and we'll get into that in the future. I do take copious notes on every word I say I'll talk about in the future. And even if I didn't, I can just watch this video again in the future and pretend that I did. So just trust me, guys. The final word, and it's a doozy, it brings up an interesting topic, is infusitive. And the reason that this is interesting is because this is a word that is considered archaic, except in the expression infusitive relatory deferment. And we're going to get to what that term means very quickly, but I want to talk about expressions that are considered archaic, except in a larger phrase. And the example I want to shine a light on, because it's the one I remember and I don't want to look something up in the middle of the video, is in one fell swoop. Now, fell is an archaic expression. If you've read Lord of the Rings, Tolkien uses it despite its archaicness for precisely to achieve that tonal effect. If he was around now and YouTube was on now, he would be doing this, and you wouldn't understand a goddamn thing he said, but it would be really smart if you could. He was a mumbler unless he was reciting. And I'm not reciting, so I guess I'm probably the better guy despite my lesser knowledge. But fell means like super strong and imposing, and it has a kind of negative connotation, like the bad guys are more often described as fell in Lord of the Rings, even though not exclusively. But in one fell swoop, nobody's saying, like, no one thinks that I'm going to swoop in on you with a imposing, strong, warlike manner. They use the phrase as though it were a word. And so no one stops to think about the components. So that's how these archaic expressions survive on past the remainder, because people just love the expression. And so think about that when you're using words. Is an expression you're using a unit of meaning in itself? In that sense, a cliche or an expression becomes a word in its own right, even though it's composed of smaller words. The smaller words don't matter. It's the collection that has meaning. So that's a useful bit of knowledge. So infusitive relatory deferment is, again, unfortunately, infusitive. We'll talk about that first. Infusitive is when you jump into a conversation that you were not part of, thinking you know what it's about, but you're confused, and you end up just infusing your confusion and unpleasantness into that conversation. Very unpleasant for the people involved, except for the person doing it, usually because they're so oblivious they don't know. We've all done this. I'm guilty of it more often than I could say. We got to work on that, guys. The expression that it is used in is infusitive relatory deferment. And this is a good one because if you have a relative that can do this for you, then you're in good hands. Deferment, if you don't know what that means, it's that thing you ask your landlord for every month. And if you do know what it means, you certainly own your own house. Now, that's a judgment call, but it's also statistically accurate. I did do the regression analysis on that one, so as much as it might sting and you might think I'm a jerk, I'm at least factually correct, because I always run the stats for everything I say, including that. And it's 0.02. No p-hacking involved. Okay, we'll get through this really quick now. Infusitive relatory deferment is when you're about to jump into a conversation and make a fool of yourself and ruin it for everyone else when everything was going fine, but your relative defers you from doing that. They stop you in time. And we all need someone like that. It's like you're at Thanksgiving, Grandpa's about to say, well, that's not true because I read an article, and his wife, the poor beleaguered soul, says, like, that's not what they're talking about, Phil. And he's like, my name's Frank. And she's like, Phil's the guy down the street that fixes the pipes, if you know what I mean. And that blew up, and then they infused, it was infusitive anyway, so it was a real rough time. She thought that Frank was overstepping his bounds, but then that happened, so none of them came out looking good. Oh man, have you just been seeing my face the whole time? I'm wearing a Jurassic World shirt because I want people to suffer, and I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your minds opening. Remember, language can spread rainbows of thought throughout the world. It can spread hope. It could spread laughter. It could spread tears. It could spread meaning. It could spread awareness. Language is important, even if you like to text with like you and r. You're still using language. But if you use good language, like me teach you, very good will you talk. And talk good you shall, for I'm sure you'll watch this every day because you have plenty of time, and this was really good.